Hello, everyone. My name is Ted Adler. I'm the president of Union Street Media, and today we're going to talk about what is the best domain name for my real estate business. So a couple of things to keep in mind. First is this is just advice. I am not the final word on any of this. And the second thing is that if you have any questions, please reach out to us at Union Street Media. We're happy to answer them. So when thinking about launching a new real estate business, or thinking about launching a new website, there's a couple of things to keep in mind as you go to buy your domain. The first is, where do you buy it? There's a number of different domain name registrars out on the internet. Popular ones include GoDaddy.com, NetworkSolutions.com, Register.com. You can buy the domain from any of those registrars. The most important thing is don't lose your username and password, because when it comes to launching your new site, you're going to want to give that information to your web development team so they can launch it for you. So a couple of things to keep in mind when you're thinking about buying that domain name. The first is make it short and easy to remember. I try to also include real estate phrases when possible in the domain. So as an example, one of my favorite domains from a client of ours is allrestonrealestate.com. This is for Eve Thompson, who we've worked with for over 10 years. And it's an easy to remember phrase that covers her market, which is Reston, and also includes key phrases like real estate into that word, into that domain name. So when someone is doing a search, you have a slightly higher likelihood of being picked up because you include the phrase that they're looking for in the domain itself. The other thing that's really important is that you can actually buy the domain. So when you're searching for the domain on GoDaddy or any of those sites, you can see if it's available for sale. And you don't want to buy only the .com. You also want to buy what's called the neighborhood, meaning the .org, the .info, the .us, all of the sort of other related phrases, at least the .net and the .org, I would say at a minimum, because you don't want to end up in a situation where all of a sudden have a domain name and then someone goes out and buys the .org and then launches essentially a similar product or similar service that would be a competitor to yours. Or there could just be general domain name confusion. Now, let's say you go to that website and you discover, that domain is not for sale. It's actually owned. Then on all of those registrar websites, you can do what's called a who is lookup. The way that that works is you type in the domain name that you're trying to purchase that's owned by someone else, and the registrar will tell you who is the owner of that domain. You'll generally find domains are owned in one of two ways, either publicly, where once you run that who is search, you can actually see the name of the owner of the domain and possibly reach out to them about buying it, or it'll be under a private registration. If it's a private registration, it can be a lot harder to find who owns that domain. Generally speaking, I try to recommend for people not to buy domain names, especially if they're owned by domain name scalpers. And as an example, years ago, we had a client that wanted to buy a domain name that included the name of a lake and then the word real estate, right? And I will leave the specific domain name anonymous so as to protect the innocent. When we finally got on the phone with the person selling the domain, they told us that it could be ours for a mere $12,685, which of course is a ridiculous sum of money to pay for a domain name. Now, after a series of negotiations, and then when they subsequently sold that domain to someone else, we were able to acquire it for them for $3,000, which, because it was a really good domain and it's very specific to what they do and had really good keywords, was probably a worthwhile purchase. That being said, in my 20 years in working with real estate brokers, that's one of maybe 2 or 3 times where we've actually worked with a client to buy a domain, because most of the time when you can buy it for $3,000 or you can buy it for $15 with a slight variation, that $15 with a slight variation is a much better investment. The third thing that I would recommend as we sort of think about purchasing domains is that if the domain is owned by someone else who might be a competitor of yours or might be someone who's been in the real estate industry for a while and they're thinking about retiring, but have had a website online for the last 20 or so years, they're a real human that you might know and interact with, that actually could be a good purchase. And the reason is that Google likes sites that have been around for a while because they have good reputation, they have a lot of inbound links. And so if you're in a market where there's a broker who might have a domain that they're not really active with, if they're possibly thinking about getting out of the business or maybe retiring, it certainly would be worthwhile to reach out to them to say, hey, it looks like you're not really using this domain. You've got a website, it's not very active. Would you consider selling it? The last thing that I would say when it comes to purchasing domain names is you want to make sure that the domain name does not include a trademarked phrase. As an example, my 6-year-old last summer launched his own lemonade stand business. He did actually a little bit too well on the graduation weekend here in Burlington at the University of Vermont, which forced us to take him down to the bank and open a bank account because 6-year-olds shouldn't be walking around with more than about $2 in their pocket. So when we walked into the bank, and it was with my dad, it was a really great moment. They said, as they were opening the account, they said, what's the name of your business? And he immediately blurted out, Star Wars Lemonade. Now, I could go buy starwarslemonade.com. However, Star Wars is obviously a trademark phrase. So that certainly you don't want to buy a domain and start building a website using that domain if the phrase is trademarked by someone else. A couple of other things to keep in mind when you're thinking about buying your domain. The first is you can have more than one domain. So as an example, allrestinrealestate.com, which is as I mentioned, one of my favorite domain names amongst our clients, is owned by a woman named Eve Thompson. She also owns evethompson.com. If you type in evethompson.com, it will take you to allrestinrealestate.com. And if you type in tedadler.com, it'll take you to a page on the Union Street Media website about me. So you definitely can have multiple domains pointing back to your primary domain. That being said, I wouldn't go crazy. It's not like back in the day where you could have a bunch of different domains that would all be linking back to your site and you'd see a really big search engine pickup on that. It's really more of a convenience factor. So for example, if you are listing a property that is at 123 Main Street and somehow you can buy 123mainstreet.com and then you can have that link go back to the listing page on your site for 123 Main Street, that could be a really good marketing tool. So instead of having to tell people to go to your website to see this particular listing, you could market 123mainstreet.com and it would take them to the actual page about the property on your website. The last thing I would recommend is please buy your domain for multiple years in advance. I can't tell you how many times we've gotten phone calls from clients that say that their website is down, and the reason their website is down is because they did not renew the domain. When you don't renew your domain, a couple of things can happen. The first is if you don't renew it and it sits for too long, your website, besides going down, can also result in someone else buying your domain, right? So you could spend all this time building your domain and your brand, and then boom, someone else could own it. The second thing is that if you register your domain and you register it well in advance, like for multiple years into the future, that's a sign to Google that you will be around for a while. Generally, spammy domains that are about pulling people in, sort of illegitimate stuff, are only registered for 1 year because they're not really looking to do anything with that domain. They're using it for not good purposes. Domains for businesses that are established and have been around for a while and will be around for a while should always be registered multiple years in advance. We recommend to our clients that they renew their domain at least 3, if not 5 years in advance. So I hope that information is helpful. I've been working with clients with their domains for years. At one point, I remember having to find somebody that had a domain down in Australia and figured out how to get that one back over to a client of ours. So if there's any questions that you ever have about domains, about domain registration, about how to use a real estate domain properly to rank well in search engines or anything along those lines, please reach out to us at Union Street Media. As always, we're here to help.